Everyone, and welcome to the fourth edition of Socium's Tech and Transformation podcast. For those of you who haven't listened, we record the TNT podcast bi-weekly, and we'll be engaging with leaders across the technology industry to get an insight into their journey and the challenges that inevitably come with scaling tech businesses. Keep an eye out for all new releases via our Socium LinkedIn page. You'll also be able to listen across iTunes, Spotify, and our YouTube channel as well. Without any further ado, today I'm joined by Hussein Badakhchani, who's held numerous positions over the years, CTO positions at a variety of fintech companies, and is currently CTO of Ziglu, a cryptocurrency payment business. So Hus, thank you for joining. Much appreciated. How you doing?
Oh, Ross, delighted to be with you. I'm doing well, thanks.
Glad to hear it. Look, Hus, I definitely haven't done you justice with that intro. So for any of our listeners that haven't come across you before, why don't you start by giving us, an overview of your background and I guess what it is you're doing at the moment.
Sure. So I think you can say that I started my career in the dot-com era. So saw a few successes and a few dot-bombs as well. Very much startup lifestyle, and that was my early exposure really. So startups are kind of in my DNA. But after a few years, I took a job with Bax, and that's the Bankers Automated Clearing System. They do retail transactions in the UK. And that was a baptism of fire in terms of learning about payments and transactional systems, vastly transactional systems that are resilient, secure, and reliable. And I was there for 6 years. That's where I earned my Distinguished Technologist Award. And the last thing I guess I did for Bax was the middleware architecture for FPS, the faster payment system. From there, I moved on to Deutsche Bank, and that was great in terms of working for a huge organization, really learning how to navigate large enterprises. That was 6 years there working on front, middle, and back office systems. And ended my career there working on the front desk on a market making application, one of the key market making applications at Deutsche Bank. That was fun. I'm glad they let me do that. They don't take any prisoners on the front desk. So I had to learn a lot very quickly, and I was actually reporting into someone who is in the hierarchy of things, my junior. So I'm really glad for that. The Deutsche Bank gave me that opportunity. It's a great place to work in that respect, and really learned banking inside out there. After Deutsche Bank, went to Utrip in Hong Kong, Singapore, and that was my first CTO role. Utrip kind of doing an international FX card. That was fairly successful. They're doing rather well now. Then I think the big success was Wave Money in Myanmar, Burma. They're the largest domestic remittance provider in the country. It's a huge country, and that's still very kind of not necessarily industrialized, a lot of rural areas. And sending money around the country is very important. It actually makes a big impact to people's lives. The previous way of doing it was literally to load paper onto vans or bikes and drive them around. And they would get attacked by bandits and be overrun and the rest of it. It's an amazingly primitive way of moving money around. But it's changed phenomenally in the last, I guess, 8-9 years. With Wave Money being at the vanguard of that change, where you can use your mobile phone, doesn't even have to be a smartphone, but to remit. And they're doing very well at the moment. I think 8% of GDP is going through Wave Money's mobile payments platform. And then finally got an opportunity to come back and work with Mark on Ziglu in London, which is essentially a global current account. So you buy, hold, sell, and ultimately spend crypto in exactly the same way as you would with fiat, with your fiat currencies, all in one place. A money management application, if you like. One for the 21st century that really encompasses everything that's happening in the crypto space and eventually in the decentralized finance space as well. So it's an exciting area to be working in, bringing challenger banking ethos to the crypto space, which I think desperately needs it. I've signed up to a load of exchanges, lots of different, all the big ones, and it's difficult. Even as a technologist and a cryptophile, you have to jump through a bunch of hoops just to do simple things like fund your account and purchase and hold a crypto and then send that crypto. It's very difficult. So I think it's an area that demands some changes to the user's experience. And that's one of the things that Ziglu is going to tackle.
A great summary there. Who's done some interesting stuff, man. I'm intrigued to know what you mentioned about a distinguished technology award. So how does one go about acquiring such an award?
Well, it was a surprise. I think it's something that Nick Masterson-Jones, who was our CTO at the time, along with the rest of the team, maybe David Gilmore as well, chief head of operations at the time. And it was just in recognition for the work that we'd done. I mean, the work that I did for Bax is really kind of, you could characterize it now as standard DevOps. So automating the infrastructure build, treating infrastructure as code as much as possible, putting it into version control, having a reproducible, reliable process for distributing it across target infrastructure, and doing that all in an automated way. So we had a lot of success in rolling out infrastructure in a standardized way across all of our estate. And it was a huge gain on productivity. It meant we could keep the team lean and focused on kind of high value work rather than toil.
And obviously there's a fair amount of traveling amongst all that. Are you firmly based now here in London for the foreseeable?
Yeah, so it's been 18 months at Ziglu, right? Building a bank from scratch, essentially a crypto bank from scratch. And the journey is going to be a few more years to really realize our goals. I'm really happy with the progress that we've made so far. We kind of launched in June to the general public, and since then we've added a range of products to the Ziglu app. It was a very minimum viable launch, just buy, hold, and sell crypto. But since then we've added peer-to-peer transfers, both in fiat and crypto, so you can send money to anyone in the Ziglu community for free instantly. That's crypto and fiat. And then also the big one, I guess, is our debit card. So we've launched the Mastercard debit card. It will be in the hands of the general public in the next few days. It's already gone out to about 200 friends and family at the moment. So field testing is ostensibly complete, and we'll be rolling out our pink glow-in-the-dark card.
Nice. Monzo, watch out.
Indeed.
One of the things you mentioned, I guess, about your background was Wave Money. That sounded incredible. To think that people are still, transporting money in that way in this day and age. It's remarkable. You mentioned there about that being your biggest success. So why was that?
I think the impact that it had. So essentially, when I arrived in Myanmar, Wave Money was processing around 3,500 transactions in a peak hour. Not much, frankly, right? Compare that to the UK faster payment system, it's a drop in the ocean. But those transactions are really important to the people that are receiving the money. It could be buying medicine, it could be buying food, it could be paying for a hospital visit. So if the money doesn't arrive on time, it has a massive impact. And 3,500 transactions, the platform was exhibiting degraded performance in terms of delivering those payments. So really my role there was, as Brad Jones, who's ex-Paro, I believe, always used military parlance whenever I talked to him. He was our CEO there. He was very much a case of like, can you in-source the IT, extract it from hostiles and bring it home? And so we did a digital transformation in flight. We deployed the mobile payments platform into a virtual private cloud. We introduced Kubernetes, containerization on the middleware, and open API tier. When I look back at what we did and compare it to what was available in Myanmar, we really took a number of risks in terms of the technology, mostly around finding the talent or training them up for what is essentially a very much an advanced first world payments infrastructure, but in a country that's still emerging from a developing economy, if you like. So that was a big risk, but I think it paid off. Now, in the 10 months that I was there, we were undergoing hypergrowth at anywhere between 25 to 35% a month. There'll be some months, like for example, in the holiday season, it would completely trail off to near zero transactions. But then the ensuing week, as soon as the holidays finished, it would be 40% growth compared to the previous month. And that was month in, month out. So by the time I left, it was 15,000 transactions in a peak hour that we were humming along quite nicely, processing all of that. And that really just has a huge impact on people's lives. So I think that's why it was one of the biggest achievements. I'm really enjoying Ziglu now, though, because I've had an opportunity, thanks to Mark, our CEO, who's a CTO and co-founder of Starling Bank, to really build something from scratch with absolutely no legacy. So, he's given me enough rope to hang myself with, essentially. And so far, I'm still in the job, so I must be doing something right. We're using Google Cloud, Google Kubernetes Engine, Istio as a service mesh. So we used Rancher in Wave Money, and that was difficult. Rancher has a lot of benefits, but I think Istio really takes it to the next level. And again, it's a Google technology. So when it comes to securing microservices and all of the additional benefits around canary deployments, A/B deployments, and all of those things, Istio was a risk at the time when we decided to use it. Skills were pretty short on the ground, but we hired the right people. So Matt Turner is my head of cloud engineering, and he was really bought in to develop Istio for us and get it all working with the back end team, the core engineering team.
I'm very keen to dig a bit deeper into Ziggler in a moment, because it sounds like you guys are doing some really interesting stuff down there for sure. One thing I did want to say, and I guess harping back to your background again, is obviously you've gone from working, Deutsche Bank, as you put it, massive, large enterprise business in a fairly, you talk about hostile environments, in the front office and an investment bank. How was that transition from, being in a business like that to suddenly being out in, out with Wave Money? You're doing what you were doing there. I mean, two totally different environments, I'd have thought.
Extremely different environments, and I was so far out of my comfort zone in both those instances that in the end you just get exhausted. Like, the stress washes over you. And at that point, that's when you become productive. So it can phase you a lot. I remember the first month of working at the front desk was absolutely brutal. It was, 18-hour days and thinking constantly about what I needed to do in the next day. And that went on for a whole month before I kind of settled down into a slightly more normal routine. It was massively out of my comfort zone. And then when I went to Hong Kong, that was interesting. Hong Kong is a little bit home from home, but then you're building something from scratch in a different culture. And then the next phase was Burma, essentially Myanmar, which again, another massive piece of culture shock. But those, putting yourself into those environments is how you progress. And I would say this to anyone, especially while you're young, you need to take these risks. If you're comfortable when in your 20s or 30s in your job, you're probably in the wrong place. You shouldn't be comfortable. You should be kind of well out of your comfort zone, doing things that push you, improving your skills, not just technical skills, but also people skills as well. You should be doing that if your long-term goal is to kind of get into a CTO role, for example, or at least head up a department, kind of run your own projects. You need to be testing yourself as early as possible. Like, I'm 46 now and I'm still out of my comfort zone. I don't think I'll ever get into a comfort zone.
No, I think you're right. I think I heard someone say once, didn't they, that to succeed, you need to, put yourself out of your comfort zone. And I completely agree that, so obviously starting a business, myself 18 months or so ago, there's I think there's forever going to be things that I'm not going to have experience of doing, and there's still new things that I'm doing every day. But it's different, and and that's what I like about it, the variety. And was that the key driver for you? When you've come out of a Deutsche Bank, it was a case of, do you know what? I want to put myself completely out of my comfort zone. Not only do I want to go and be a CTO, but I want to go in a different country. I want to go and learn that culture. Was that really important for you, sort of molding you as to what you are today?
Yeah, I think 6 years is about the maximum amount of time I think I could spend in a single institution. Now, there was quite a lot of mobility in places like Deutsche Bank and BACS. Don't get me wrong, there's a clear progression. But beyond 6 years, I think is a little bit dangerous. You become institutionalized. And it was actually I wasn't actively looking, although I was thinking probably time to move on. One of the last things that I did at Deutsche Bank was to expose them to public cloud. We introduced OpenShift internally. It's a private cloud, and we're using Azure for pieces of their public cloud. So it was at the time quite a bold step for Deutsche Bank to take. Obviously, the challenger banks had already done that a while ago, so it wasn't pioneering, but it was pretty innovative for a large investment bank. But then it was through LinkedIn. I got contacted directly by the founders of UTrip and had a chat with them. I thought, this is really exciting. This is kind of an opportunity to go halfway around the world, explore a different culture, and at the same time, take some risks and do some things from scratch. Put some of the principles and learnings that I've constantly tell other people that they should do, actually exercise them myself.
I must admit, one of the biggest regrets that I have in my life today is probably not doing trap. I came out of university, I went straight there from college, I came straight into work. I was a skint student, I thought it was money.
You're still young though, there's plenty of
I know, but I've also got 2 young kids now and a girlfriend, and I think, yeah, just popping off for 3 months.
It does help to have a very tolerant partner. I mean, I've got a 4-year-old son, 5 months in November, so yeah, it does help. Let's
talk about Ziglu. Look, I know you've sort of given us a couple of snippets there as to what it is that you guys are doing at the moment, and you've been there now, so circa 18 months.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. How's that journey been so far?
It's been a ride. It always is, right? I actually met Mark before I went to Hong Kong, and he gave me 1 hour of his time. At the time, he was at Starling Bank, so it's quite amazing that the CTO of Starling Bank would take 1 hour of his time just to speak to some guy that he got introduced to over Twitter by our mutual colleague Simon VC. He's the CTO of Fronted now. I sat down with him for 1 hour, and he really gave me, in that 1 hour, he gave me a huge amount of advice around the technology selection process for the partners that you need to integrate with for a challenger bank. Took the advice and it really accelerated our integration at UTrip. When I got back, again, it was via Twitter, got reintroduced to Mark. And Mark realized when I met him that I was in his contacts, but it'd been a few years, so he'd completely forgotten. And when he described to me his vision for what he wanted to achieve with this global current account and, bringing parity between crypto and fiat currencies, I just thought this is the right place at the right time with the right person. It's been the ride, it hasn't been easy. We had to go through, Brexit, which meant for a small startup, the funding kind of runway situation slowed down over that period. It was a bit difficult. Also, we got hit by COVID, but actually that was probably a blessing in disguise. We were about 9 months in, I think, as a team, so mostly assembled. And when lockdown hit us, and Mark locked us down a week before Boris did the rest of the country. The first couple of weeks were manic, right? People not really understanding how they're supposed to work or use the tools. Annoying examples when people would drop calendar invites into your meeting, and then you have back-to-back meetings all day, every day for the whole bloody week. And then there's the verbose slacking that went on for a while, and we've got quite a few people that are easily distracted by Slack. But I think after the first 2 weeks, we got into a pretty good cadence, and I doubt if we would have been able to launch when we did if it wasn't for lockdown and remote working. Productivity has ultimately gone through the roof.
And if you had to adopt your management style, in light of the fact that obviously we are in the midst of a pandemic and you're not with the guys on a day-to-day basis at the moment.
So, I think some of the things that wear on people the most or surprise them when they come from an enterprise background into a startup is the level of uncertainty. You just got to really get used to being in a completely uncertain environment most of the time. And that's difficult. Some people really can't handle the uncertainty. And then if they can't handle the lack of a routine, and it isn't routine. Things are starting to crystallize now after kind of 18 months for me, 2 years for Mark in this role. They're starting to crystallize, but at the same time, everything's moving at such a pace that you can't really overly commit to any kind of process. There's some basic all processes have to be very lightweight, and that expressed itself in our ceremonies, for example. So we were doing daily stand-ups, but that was pointless. What kind of realized that all we're doing is getting people to repeat themselves on a daily basis is actually quite demoralizing and boring after a while. So we killed that, and just it's up to managers' discretions to have meetings along functional lines. We're too small to have squads or pods, right? So the IT department is split into cloud engineering, core engineering, mobile application development, and QA. And those teams kind of meet, the three kind of engineering teams, the development teams meet on a daily basis. QA and product kind of jump in and out of those meetings. And then we have a grandiose name, Scrum of Scrums, for a 15-minute meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where myself and Nick, who's our CPO, along with our leads, just make sure everyone's doing what we agreed that we were going to do. And if there are any blockers, try and remove those.
Yeah.
So it's far more, I think, productive way of doing things. And things change a lot in any startup, but also given we're in a growth phase, then you just got to be prepared for a really large amount of uncertainty in everything.
Yeah, and I guess aside from the sort of just general uncertainty, in the world in general at this moment in time, what's been the biggest challenge for you as CTO of that business? Hiring, yeah.
I thought it was difficult to hire in Myanmar, and it was. We actually went to Singapore to hire repats to bring back home to Myanmar. That was quite a challenge. It worked. We managed to hire a couple of people, bring them back from Singapore. But even I think there was a number of constraints that made hiring in London really, really difficult, or hiring in the UK. Well, one of them was hiring in London, right? Getting people to come into the office was a challenge. Go engineers are less likely to want to spend a 9 to 5 in the office, never mind longer hours, which is actually quite necessary at the beginning stage. In a startup, there's a lot of discovery. You need people to be able to communicate very well, and they normally do that better face-to-face. That's why we insisted people be in the office in the early days. And a lot of people just didn't want to do that. If you have no remote working, no thanks. Don't care what your proposition is. It's not going to match with my lifestyle. Yeah. So that was tough. Then if you look at the technology stack, we're competing with challenger banks for talent, and we're competing with the larger banks and the cloud providers themselves for talent. So we made it really tough in terms of a very narrow range of skills that we're looking for, and they're very thin on the ground. And again, you have to hire people who can come into the office. So it's really, really tough. We signed up loads of agencies initially, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do, but it did help. I mean, I was being inundated by CVs and going through 10, 20 CVs a day, essentially. And those were filtered relatively well as well by the time they got to me. It wasn't junk CVs from the agencies. They were pretty good. And I'd be doing 3 or 4 interviews a day. I think at its height, I hired 4 people in 10 days. Which isn't too bad, but it's difficult. And now I think some of those constraints have been lifted. So we are fully remote, digital first organization. We always knew that that's what we wanted to do. This lockdown just made it easier. The talent pool is remarkably good in the rest of the country and outside of London, outside of the Southeast. I've been very pleasantly surprised as to the kind of talent that we can find in the UK that outside of the Southeast really, really kind of opened my eyes, essentially. We're still not hiring remotely, let's say outside of the EU or in the EU. We're not necessarily hiring from close by time zones yet. There's still some legal questions. It's not as easy as it sounds to make those hires. But I think just within the UK, allowing people to work remotely makes a big difference.
Is there anything you did knowing what you know now about the I guess the challenges that hiring has posed? Is there anything that you would do differently?
I think we probably didn't experiment enough with different options for hiring. We went the traditional route of just signing up loads of agencies. We did look at hiring platforms, and we had some success with them, right? But they're very time intensive. The reality with hiring is that, look, it's a critical part of the role. One of the things that you have to do as a CTO, beyond choosing the technology stack, is finding the people. And it's like a bit of chicken and egg, right? You don't make the technology decisions until you know what's available in talent-wise. But it's which comes first, right? And I knew what technology I wanted to use. So I was very keen to use the Google Cloud Platform, Kubernetes Engine, and Istio. And when it came to the mobile application, we used Xamarin. That's because I inherited Bart. He was already, Bart King is our head of mobile development, and he's basically a bit of a whiz kid when it comes to Xamarin. So it was a no-brainer to continue using it, especially as it's cross compiles into iOS and Java. So one code base is kind of critical on the mobile app side, I think, if you want to keep the team lean, which is what I want to do. But what would I do differently? It's hard to say, really. If I could participate more in events, just to broaden my network of people that in the technologies that I'm interested in. I think have been helpful. But ultimately, you have to invest a huge amount of time in hiring. You've got to get it right, because hiring the wrong people is extremely expensive. Um, for a startup, it could be lethal. So really, you've got to invest the time and effort in hiring, and I hope we're doing that.
Thank you. There was a lot of clamor for cryptocurrency. A few years back, it was everywhere. I think I lost count of how many of my friends were clutching to their Coinbase apps on their phone, and it was constant in the news. You see that seems to have died down a little bit, but then I think from the conversations that I'm having in the wider market, there are startups left, right, and centre all over London and globally for that matter who are who obviously see a real opportunity here. Is it a myth to think that the cryptocurrency bubble was well and truly burst?
Definitely hasn't burst. I mean, crypto's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. I think that there's been a lot of recognition from different countries around the world, some of whom banned it and then realized they couldn't. It was a bit pointless. So I think it's part of the financial ecosystem now, whether you like it or not. The exciting thing that's happening right now in the crypto space, I think, is decentralized finance. It's a little bit of Wild West out there, and this is one of the things that we want to do at Ziglu. We want to be a safe place for our customers to kind of get exposure to crypto and maybe try out some of the more novel features that are available, potentially savings down the line, for example. But we're a regulated entity, one of the few that are in the UK for crypto management. We're MLD5 compliant, and we have our EMI license. And it's really about making it simple and safe to gain exposure to buy, hold, sell, and spend crypto. That's definitely we're in the business of making it as safe as possible for our customers.
And I guess looking forward, obviously, I know you're very much in the weeds. It's all go at the moment. Releasing the card release coming up very soon. But what's the sort of the mid to long term plan for Ziggler?
So that's really something for our chief product officer to work on at the moment. There shouldn't be no surprises. There's some interesting things that we're looking at, and anything around buying, holding, selling, and spending, saving crypto, I think is going to be of interest to us and other fiat currencies as well. So we do want to expand, into Europe and other regions, but right now our focus is the UK. For me, on a day-to-day kind of basis, one of the things I'm trying to do is mature the organization from a process standpoint and regulatory and compliance standpoint. So I know what it's like to work in a large investment bank where basically you can't move for the regulatory environment, and it's committee after committee after committee to get anything done. So I want to avoid that for us here at Ziglu. And one of the things that I'm doing now is PCI DSS compliance. So we're level 2 certified, but we want to be level 1 eventually. And the trigger point for that is 300,000 card transactions a year. But way before we get there, I want to get our to that point, to that trigger point. I want to make sure our processes, procedures, and standards are all up to scratch. So one of the things that I'm doing right now is aligning ISO 27001 and PCI DSS in a way that doesn't impact the roadmap delivery. So I think there's a good picture that I saw that Nick put together, which is, it shows an iceberg, and the top of the iceberg is the mobile app. Underneath it is core engineering, a lot of work. The sea in which the iceberg is floating in is cloud engineering. And then you have the Titanic crashing into that iceberg, which is some of our third parties that we integrate with some of their legacy technology. There's some speedboats as well, right? But I think it's a good way of conceptualizing how much work is required to deliver a mobile application that the customer sees. And you don't see all the work around the compliance and regulatory regimes that and we're under most of them. PSD2, EMD, MLD5. What else can I throw at you? PCI DSS. You name it. As a regulated entity, we got to comply with all of those regimes, and it's a huge amount of work.
I guess so. Finally, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you're a busy man. If I look at where the demographic of the people who listen to this is it's CTOs, it's founders. What advice can you give to, I guess, any sort of budding CTO out there who's looking to sort of embark on their first journey within the fintech or startup space?
So look, the key decisions that you need to make initially is what is the technology stack? As we discussed, the talent pool impacts that decision for sure. Then it's a case of what do you build and buy? So, we used a lot of cloud services. I think you've got to be cloud native, you've got to be born in the cloud now to get that. It really has a huge impact on your costs and your lead times. You can do a lot more by being cloud native. I'd say you need to understand you need to have some guiding principles. Like for me, it's no dev, no ops, and no IT. Those are guiding principles that they're not laws, like universal laws that can't be broken, but they're guiding principles that you should bring to bear on any decision that you're making to inform those decisions. And be prepared for uncertainty. But remember, I think the other big piece of advice I would get is that you're going to make a lot of decisions, not entirely on your own. So your governance structure has to be sound. And I would say, always remember this, right? If you have decision-making rights, then you're accountable for those decision rights, commensurate with the amount of decision-making rights you have. So if you have ultimate veto rights on a decision, you're accountable for it. If you have input in the decision, or someone that you're working with has input into those decisions, then they should have a commensurate amount of accountability for those decisions. And that's something, I think the whole accountability piece around decision-making rights is something that you need to learn to master quite quickly. Because if you're delegating work to people, you need to make it clear to them to the extent that to what extent they own that work. We're a small company, about 30 people at the moment, but we're expanding quickly. The ethos that I'm using for hiring is hiring owners. Why do we do that? Well, we make big demands on the people that we work with. I expect them to have opinions. I expect them to kind of go the extra mile when they need to. Expect them to wear multiple hats. You're going to be, for a new founder as a CTO, you're going to have to get involved in some elements of marketing, finance, and everything else. It's kind of unavoidable. You're not going to be in some ivory tower dreaming up ways of coding things better. That's not the reality of the situation. Not for most startups anyway, that I'm aware of. You're going to have to get your hands dirty in other roles. So yeah, having some guiding principles is helpful.
Good. No, very handy. Thank you, mate. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully it's given the listeners insight into what life is like at Ziglu. It's been great advice there. The CTO is about to go on a similar journey. Yeah, to all the listeners, I hope it's been productive. Hope you've enjoyed listening, and thank you very much. Again, thanks, mate. Have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks, Ross. It's been a pleasure. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.